maybe other people have experienced this when they have a miracle, but you're not standing around with the clouds part and rays coming down and going, oh, you're just like, going to serve this food and I'm just going to keep going. And something's happening, but you're just like, I'm just going to keep serving this food.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome to episode 208. We're dealing with loaves and fishes today. Yeah. How many times have I said it? That everything that we read about in the Bible is still happening today. So today, I don't think we've done loaves and fishes. If we have, I can't remember. So let's do loaves and fishes today. Tammy is back with us. I actually reran her episode 204, not that long ago on Easter Sunday, because it was on an Easter Sunday that Tammy had this huge conversion in her own life. So she has more stories today.
But I'm just going to be blunt and say they don't really make me look in the best light. I'm just going to say that.
That's our goal, Tammy, to have you not look good. We're going to do all we can to corrupt any good thoughts we would even have about you.
I know, but I'm just trying to point out that, God can work even in our ignorance and unhappiness. Let me tell you the first story.
Yeah.
Okay, so
there was a gentleman at Tammy's church who periodically went on mission trips down to Mexico, Tijuana, helped out those in need, built homes, fed the hungry, that kind of thing. And he always wanted others to go with him. Tammy never felt the desire to go down, donated to the cause, but she wasn't going to go.
I'll be honest with you. I like comfort, and I'm a creature that just enjoys being home. He got up and said, I've got this sudden trip, and the groups that we're going to be building the house with are recovering addicts and alcoholics. Well, that is a heart love that my husband and I have, because we've know a lot of addicts and alcoholics, and we've both been in recovery for years. And I just felt God saying, you're supposed to go on this trip. And I'm like, what? And I remember thinking, I don't really want to do this.
And just a little background on you from your previous time. You were an alcoholic at what, age 14?
16.
Excuse me, I don't want to go too early on you here.
Yeah.
But
yeah, 16.
You were an old geezer at 16 going through, I mean, you have had a life. You have had a life. So you've been there. You've been through this war.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. See, when God sometimes he puts pressure, it's just like a pressure. It's like a consuming thought pressure that just won't lift. My husband loves mission trips, so for him it's not a big deal. And we have to come up with like $3,000 and the flight money. And I remember thinking that's just not possible in our lives. And so afterwards I turned to my husband and I said, I think we're supposed to go on this mission trip. And he's like, what? Well, he gets a bonus at work, and it's the cost of the flight and the contribution for what we have to come up with for the house. It's just crazy that the money's theirs. So I said, okay. So we get down to Tijuana. I was so terrified. I can't speak Spanish, and I didn't know how I was going to communicate with anybody down there. And so I meet all these men, and lo and behold, they're all deported American speaking. I mean, they were from America and were deported. And so they all speak English. And so, it was like God said, I've got everything under control. This is nothing that you need to worry about or have any responsibility for. I'm in control of everything. And so we get into the process of building this house. And the people that we're staying with, the missionaries, are like, we're going to go down to the canal and we're going to feed the homeless. And I'm like, okay, well, what they have down there, Trapper, is there's no social services really along the border. So when somebody's deported, they're basically homeless. And so they live at the canals until they can kind of figure out their lives. And they said, well, there's usually like 50 to 75 people. And so the housekeeper, she made, those igloo round insulated containers, like for drinks.
Yeah.
She filled it with scrambled eggs and rice, and we had like two boxes of fruit, and I think we had some drinks like water. And we go down to the border at the canal, and there wasn't 75 people. There was like over 200 people, and they were just stretched out forever. And I just turned to the person. I'm like, we're going to run out of food. And she's like, yeah, but we'll just serve until everybody gets, till we run out. And they had hired, this is going to sound crazy. They had hired a gang member, an ex-gang member that got saved. His name was Amar, I think, to guard us. I know this is going to sound crazy.
Wait, you've got only in America or just over the border.
Yeah.
So he's your
Okay,
he's
his
your
name
protection.
is Omar. His name is Omar, and he had all the gang tattoos and everything. And he walked up to me. He's like, "Ma'am, I'm going to stand next to you, and nobody's going to bother you." And I'm like, "Okay."
Well,
Just
what was
like,
the fear? Someone would hurt you to get to the food, basically?
yeah, like they were going to get really angry, or it was just. I think there was just concern that there was just so many people, and there was just a lot of people there, and they were just worried that, yeah, they just didn't want anything to happen. So they had the gang member standing next to me, and he's kind of watching the crowd. And so I'm serving this food, and I'm going as fast as I can because this is an assembly line. And I would look up, and Omar would say, "Don't worry." And these people would look at him, and they look down, and they keep walking. So I'm in the zone. I'm just serving this food, and I look down, and I'm like, "There's no way. There's no way this food's going to stretch. It's just not going to happen." And I feel really bad for these people because this is like their only meal for the day. And I look up and there's more people. And I keep scooping the food into a cup, and I hand it to the people, and I keep doing it, and I keep doing it. And Trapper, this is like loaves and fishes. It just doesn't stop. The food doesn't stop. And
I
so I
love it.
keep scooping, and I keep putting in the cup. And then I look up, and they were going through a second time. And I'm like, no.
One igloo full of this, and you just keep
Yes.
scooping.
Yes. And because there's a line and it keeps moving. And I remember at that moment thinking, is this happening? Is this really happening? And I kept going and kept going. And when they had had enough, I looked down, and there's like maybe 2 cups left. And I give it to the person that was at the end line. I'm like, here, you want some more? And I kept thinking, is this possible? How can this be?
You fed hundreds.
Hundreds, literally hundreds. And I remember thinking, I just don't believe it. So we get back to the house, and I said, did anybody experience this like I did? And they all start talking. We all discuss the improbability that that food could have stretched, not once, but twice, and fed all those people. And so I walked away from that with an understanding that we can pray for miracles and we can ask for miracles, but sometimes God just gives miracles. And it's got nothing to do with our desire or what we want to happen. It just happens. And I was so blown away by that. So anyway, that's the first case.
Let's pause for a second, because this is gorgeous, Tammy. This is so gorgeous, because this isn't just for you, and it's not just for them. It's for us. It's for us who are listening, and I'm getting chills because you're just seeing, as you say, God's hand. All those thousands who gathered with Christ and the apostles, and the loaves and the fishes and all that, they saw it too. They're looking at what Jesus and the apostles are doing too. This is impossible. And all those people who are in line going, is there going to be enough by the time I get there? They experienced it, and then they went through the line twice, so they got to feel it, see it, experience it too. And we're all feeling it. We're all feeling it as you tell this story of, my gosh, God's right there. And those of us in America who kind of, we're not sure what to think of what's going on down there at the border, and we hear all the mayhem and everything, and here's this moment of just God being God. Incredible. Because people are people. Are you still there? Did I lose you?
I don't know what happened.
I did a great monologue without you.
Can you repeat it? Because I didn't hear it.
Nah, I'm just going to let you listen to it on the podcast. Heck with it. I'm going off on this thing. She's not commenting. I'll just keep going. And it was a miracle. God didn't want me interrupted or anything. Gee.
It was really funny. I was like, all of a sudden you were gone. I was like, what just happened?
Did you hear me start the sentence?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, good. Well, here's my finish. My finish
Okay.
is, and that's why he did it. The end. Well, just To sum it up a little bit, it's
Oh
just
my
God
gosh.
being God. He wanted all of us to experience this loaves and fishes story, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. And you know what's really interesting about it is that I had been in charismatic Pentecostal circles, but I think in the back of my mind, I didn't really honestly believe in miracles. I know this sounds crazy, but I just didn't really experience them, so I didn't really think that they were there.
Here's the deal, and I go back to this again. These things are still happening. Everything we read about is still happening, and it is a sin. It's an absolute sin that this kind of story isn't being told in a church.
I agree.
This is the kind of thing that you should be able to go back to your church and say, I got a story for you, and you should be invited up to fortify everyone's faith that these things are still happening. It cracks me up. We read that gospel. It's in all four gospels. That story is in all four gospels. So apparently it's kind of important. But when it comes to it actually happening now, I don't know, Tammy. We'll try to get to that sometime. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
This is
do.
crazy. It's crazy.
I do. I think maybe people think it's not true. I don't really
Of course
understand
they
it.
think it's not true because
I don't
it's a fairy
know.
tale story from 2,000 years ago. Ah, they're making that stuff up, you know.
You know, if Omar wasn't standing there and my husband wasn't serving with me, I could see how people could say it was not real,
Sure.
but I had witnesses. It really was one of those moments that when you're in the midst of it, you're in your mind, you're thinking this might be a miracle, but you're not like dwelling in it. You're like busy.
And
You know what I mean?
here's another part of the story because this gospel got watered down over time by some ministers who said things like, well, what actually happened was that people brought food and they shared amongst each other. And so it really wasn't a miracle. It was love with bull. No,
Yeah,
there
I
actually was a
agree.
multiplication of the loaves and fishes, or in this case, the rice and the, what else did you say?
Eggs,
The famous
rice and eggs.
multiplication of the rice and eggs.
It was all donated and they cooked it up and took it down there. And I don't know. It's yeah, maybe other people have experienced this when they have a miracle, but you're not standing around and with the clouds part and rays coming down and going, oh, you're just like, gonna serve this food and I'm just gonna keep
Yeah.
going. And you know something's happening, but you're just like, I'm just gonna keep serving this food. And then afterwards it hits you.
I've talked to God about this, because I do criticize him now and then. God, when you do these kinds of things, could you please provide music? Because in the
Yes.
movies, you get the music,
Yes.
you get that moment
Yes.
where, as you said, and you go,
Yeah.
oh, something big's happening, must be a
Yeah.
miracle.
Yeah.
But in
That
real
must be
life,
what's
it's just,
happening.
I'm scooping. I just keep scooping.
Yes, I keep scooping and I keep thinking they're going to be so mad when we run out.
And I'm going to get hurt. And Omar, where's
Yeah.
Omar?
Omar, get over it. Yes, that's exactly what it was in the back of my mind. I'm like, we're going to run out and they're going to be really mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's gorgeous. That's gorgeous, Tammy. That's just terrific. What a cool miracle. I love that. I love that. Okay.
Okay. The second one is one that was full of self pity. I'm just going to be blunt with you.
Okay. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let's pause right here, shall we? I love Tammy. She's just authentic, isn't she? We'll get back to Tammy in a second here and her story here as we start with loaves and fishes. And now we're about to go on a motorcycle ride. We have a Patreon shout out here. Thank you, Stuart. Stuart Hoynack has joined the Patreon family. Thank you so much, Stuart. And if you'd like to do the same and support what we do around here, if these stories are a blessing and you're brought closer to God, then patreon.com, just search for Trapper Jack. Or you can come here to episode 208 of touchedbyheaven.net and just clicking your way through. Thank you so much. All right, we're ready for a motorcycle ride and a pity party with Tammy here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God.
We decided with a group of people to go to Missouri on motorcycles. And I'm on the back of my husband's motorcycle. And we're going to go to, it was like southern Missouri. So it's a ways for me. I think the whole trip was going to be like 9, 10 hours. And so, we're riding along and I'm getting uncomfortable. The seat is not very comfortable. And so we get to the first gas station and I'm just getting off and I'm starting to get into self-pity mode about my butt hurts. I know it's awful. You can leave that out if you want. And
Wait, hold up, Tammy. We've all been there. Our butts hurt. And riding on a
much,
motorcycle for 8, 9, 10 hours, not fun. How many hours
yeah.
had you been on the thing so far?
Oh gosh, I think we were on it for 3 hours. So I'm stretching and trying to like get more comfortable and like walking around. And this guy walks up, we're filling up, and he says, I just want you people to know that people die on these roads down here. Uh, Cars hit motorcycles. And I'm like, huh? Okay, thank you. And he's like, I just want you to be cautious because, you know, we see it. People get killed down here. And he walks away, and I turned to my husband and I said, God wants us to go home. I just know he does, because I've never, ever, in the thousands of miles we rode, ever had anybody come up and say, you're going to get killed out here. And he's like, forget about it. It's stupid. We're going to keep going. And I remember, no, nobody's ever said that to us, Brian. Never.
That man and my butt are talking to us.
And so I'm like, no, this isn't, I think God's trying to tell us to go home. And he's like, no, we're going to go. And so we go on and we get to another gas station. And I'm really getting super uncomfortable on this seat. I think it's another 3 hours. I'm walking around my pity party, and this woman walks up while we're getting gas, and she says, you got to watch it down here. Cars hit motorcycles and people get killed. You need to be careful. And I said, thank you very much for sharing. And I turned to my husband and I said, look, this woman just said we're going to die because the cars down here are going to hit us. I said, I think God's telling us that we're going to get in a car accident and die. And he's like, oh my goodness, you're being so dramatic. And I said, no, seriously, nobody's ever said this to us before. Never. They've never told us this, Brian. Not once, but twice. I said, this is not possible. We need to go back. I said that to him, and he's like, you're being dramatic. You just need to stop. And I'm like, okay, I guess, God's warned us twice. There's nothing we can do. He's not going to listen to me. And we had these other people with us, and he didn't want to be embarrassed and go home. I know that was a lot of it because I think there was, one of his best friends it was just a bunch of people. And so we get on the motorcycle, and I'm full of self-pity because my butt hurts. And we get to a restaurant, and I said, how far? And he's like, a couple more hours. And at this point, I'm getting really angry. I'm like, I know he's lying to me at this point. This is going to be an all-day trip. It's miserable. And we'd ride for another 2 hours, and we stop at a gas station. And I'm like, oh, I'm so over this trip. And so I'm walking around, and I'm angry, and I've got self-pity. And this man walks up to us, and he says, you got to be careful. I'm not kidding. He says this, you got to be careful. Cars hit motorcycles all the time down on these roads, and people get killed. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I turned to him and I said, so could you kind of tell me more about that? And he's like, right below at the intersection next to this gas station, we're kind of up on a hill, my daughter and her husband were killed on a motorcycle by a car. They ran a stop sign or stoplight, and they hit them and killed them. And it was almost like God tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is what this was all about. And I'm like, oh. And I turned to him and I said, can you tell me a little more about your daughter? And he starts to, tell about, the trip, and she had died and how lonely he was because his wife just died. And I said, do you think we can pray for you, with you? And I get all the people and we pray for him. And we're praying for him and his family. And I look up after we're done, and he's just weeping. He's weeping, and he's talking about how much he misses her and how this meant so much to him that we took the time to pray with him. And I remember at the time thinking, I could have missed all this because I'm into self-pity so deep that I can't see that God is trying to speak to me. And that whole time, God had been saying, not that you're going to die on this road, but that you need to pay attention because somebody else had a loss, and they need you guys to reach out to them. And so, we get done, and he thanks us for that. He tells us that it means so much to him that we took the time to do that. And then he gets in his truck, and we get on the bike, and we go on our way. And it was just a perfect lesson in God saying, sometimes these divine appointments can happen, and I'm trying to prepare you for it, but you got to get out of the way, just like Tijuana, and let me do the work, but you participate in it also. It's not like I'm just doing all these things without your hands and feet doing it too. So that's what happened. And I remember the time thinking, I'm so glad that God chose to use us and that we were there for this man. But what do you think of that story?
I think God is amazing on how he talks to us. You know, they say it's in the whispers.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the whispers. And it was in a quiet whisper that you were feeding people. You know, I'm going to give you more. I'll give you more. And it was just like it kept coming there. Even, but afterwards, it's a very loud whisper, isn't it? It's really loud.
Yes.
It starts out as kind of a little thing, and then on that one, again, the whispers of calling you to prayer, of how here, you know, and I've been bumping up against this recently too, of just trying to understand what he's saying, and you know, we want it now. Explain to me
Yes.
right now what you're doing. You want us to go home? And you got your husband pushing back. And sometimes
Yeah.
the Holy Spirit, we think the Holy Spirit's in us. We think it's in us.
Yes.
I'm getting a message, and we get this pushback. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the Holy Spirit is in the pushback. You know,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that is a very good
I
point.
just find it interesting because a lot of times my wife and I will go through this where I'll think I have something, and she will push back. And I realized later, no, she had the Spirit. She was the one. You know, I'm thinking I've got the flow here, and it's like, no. And sometimes it's the other way around. I've just been bumping into that a lot lately. And what he was doing for you was building your trust. It ultimately a little bit about how the Spirit works in your husband,
Yeah,
and
I
then
think so.
to get you to that point of being able to hear the story, because that man needed a prayer. He was hurting.
He was, and the most, I guess, interesting part about it is God's timing is so perfect. Literally,
Yeah.
hours and hours we rode,
And
and
your butt can testify.
yeah, but it was that particular moment in time was meant to be at that particular moment in time.
Every day, God is speaking to us. Every day, He's speaking
Yes.
to me and you, and I always say the church and the world, and we're just oblivious to the conversation. And you have the awareness. And what Touched by Heaven is about to make is to help people be aware that the conversations are going on. We highlight the really loud ones, but look at yours. How many people in the same situation down there at the border and scooping and scooping? Boy, I can't believe how well this was packed. I didn't realize how many eggs and rice were in here. Boy, did they pack this stuff well. You know, they're missing the whole thing. They're missing it.
I never thought of that,
You
but
know?
yeah, I suppose,
True?
I suppose, but I don't know how you could possibly think that. I mean, there
But
was
people
so many
do. It's like,
people.
man, I can't believe how that's just Gladys, you packed this stuff so well. This is just awesome. You know, we've had hundreds. Duh.
Yeah,
You know,
it was really. It's always stayed with me that God doesn't really need us. He allows us to participate,
just beautiful.
and I don't think Missouri drivers are out to kill motorcyclists. I don't believe it.
Oh, everyone knows they are. It's the show me state. Show me how
And you know
you
what?
hate motorcyclists, Missouri.
I
Just
have
show me.
never had anybody ever come up to me after that. Never happened again.
Right?
It's never happened. Nobody's ever come up to me and said, "You're going to die today." Nobody's ever done it.
Any feedback from your other episode, by the way?
Okay, so I'm going to be really, really blunt.
Okay.
I can't listen to it.
Because you cry.
I cry.
You cry beautifully. I love how you cry.
Oh, I know. It's very dramatic. I cry, and I also, it's a very transparent, tender experience for me. It's very vulnerable. So I can't listen to it. But when I give it to other people, when I tell it to other people, it's almost like you're opening yourself up. And so God took a damaged person like Paul and changed him, and he changed me too. So I haven't listened to it, but other people have, and they've told me that they've really got a lot out of it. So I try to. Yeah, I don't listen to myself sing at church either. They videotape it. I never listen, but I don't listen to it because have you ever heard of the phenomenon where you don't like your voice? You ever heard that?
No, nobody likes their own voice.
Nobody
likes their own. No,
because it's an external sound that
we
hear
don't know how we sound until we hear it on a recording and go, "Oh, that's how I sound." Yeah.
Can I tell you one thing? If you don't record it,
well, I'm going to record it, but I won't use it. How's that?
Okay, don't use it. Okay,
I won't use it.
Okay, so I was saved, and I started begging God to show me how I could do for Him. Like, what can I do now that you've saved me? What can I do to pay you back for what you've given me? And I'd been praying, and just my heart my soul was crying out to him, what is it you want me to do? And so I'm riding on the back of my husband's motorcycle. I ride my own, by the way, but I was on the back of his. And so I know this is going to sound ridiculous, and I've only told two people. One was a pastor, and the other one was my husband. It's almost like a movie of a room full of people, and there's music, and there is motion. I can see people moving, and I'm up on the stage, and I can feel the Holy Spirit at the rear of the room start to move forward through the room. And I remember it was like a tidal wave. It's almost like you could feel it, it was like a mist. I mean, you can't see it, but you can almost like visualize it like a wave. It's moving through the room, and people are dropping to their knees, they're getting saved, and they're crying out to Jesus.
You're on the back of a motorcycle and getting this?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've been praying, God, can you just tell me what you want me to do? Mm-hmm. And I've never had visions before that one at Easter. So to me, I didn't know at that time with the Easter thing, and the pastor was not helpful. I didn't really understand what had happened. I really didn't. I didn't know that God spoke to people that way. And so when this vision happens on the motorcycle and this experience is unfolding, it's like Jesus comes into the frame, and he turns to me and he smiles. And I'm like, okay. And then it fades away. So I start a pursuit. I know it's going to sound crazy because, it seems like this is almost how man is designed. I said, okay, I guess they want me to be a pastor, a preacher or something. And so I started taking classes, and I start working on because I'm already a public speaker, I do it for a living. I'm supposed to preach. Well, it just didn't go anywhere. I wasn't really supposed to do it. And so I thought, I don't know what you want me to do. We did have moments where God showed up and did some amazing things, but that event never happened, that vision. And so I started going to this church, and in the course of talking to them, I told them, well, my husband's a guitar player, and he likes to play guitar for worship teams. And I said, well, I've sang for this outreach that we've done, but I don't really do it professionally or anything. And he's like, well, I want you to come up and sing. So I've been singing up there. And at one point, I said to Jesus, I said, is this where I'm supposed to be? And I saw that vision of him turning to me and smiling. So I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't know where it's going to go. That's why I don't want you to share it with people, because I don't want it to sound like I know it all, because I don't. The outcome hasn't happened yet.
I'll ask you that you allow me to share it, and here's why. I think everybody needs to understand, and you're kind of pushing me to say something I don't want to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because sometimes we read things wrong. Sometimes we think, and I don't know about you, but I tend to want to kind of knee-jerk it because it's so obvious this is what God wants me to do. Not always. It's like sometimes you're supposed to kind of think about it, pray about it. And I'll give you an example, is that on this podcast, okay, I get this brilliant letter from a listener and supporter on Patreon. She saw me being interviewed on another podcast, came and went, this is what I've been looking for. I didn't know this existed. This whole Touched by Heaven and all these encounters and everything that we read about in the Bible is still happening today. And this is fabulous. And she said, you need to be, I know you're on YouTube, but you need to be really on YouTube. People need to be able to see these interviews. So we went down, I immediately went, yeah, she's got it. Well, I started going down that path. I started recording interviews on video, and I lost sound quality because people are farther away from their microphones, right? And so the audio is taking a hit. The video, a lot of it is just horrible because not everybody can be in a perfectly lit place with microphones. They're not. And so the sound is taking a hit. Video is taking a hit. And I keep praying, going, what? Help me, Jesus. Why isn't this adding up? Why am I keep walking off cliffs? And then last night, one of our listeners and supporters contacted me. We talked about it, and he says, I can tell you spend a lot of time. I said, I can spend 10 hours editing these episodes.
Wow.
Sound is important to me. I'm a radio guy. I'm a blind guy. Sound is everything to me. And sound was taking a hit, let alone the video. So, and then the other thing, this morning, I'm watching a video on a famous guitarist, Les Paul. But at the end of it, the guy who put together this video, and he says, and remember, never compromise your sound. And I'm going, what? And I'm going, and
Yeah,
this is how God speaks to us.
I think so.
And we bounce around a little bit looking for the answer, but he will give us the answer. He will give us the answer. And certainly within the video, I can insert my stuff within the video without messing up the podcast, you know. And for you, Tammy, there you are on stage and you're singing and he's smiling and maybe you
Yeah,
have found it. So
I think so.
I'm embarrassed to tell that story of what I just told you. So I say that I air this as a way to help people understand that if you're confused by God and where he has you and where he's sending you, don't worry, the rest of us are right there with you. You know,
Right.
is that
Yeah.
okay? Can we do that?
Yeah, I guess, it's just, I, part of me is kind of embarrassed because I talked to my pastor once about it. It's like, as human beings, we just want to make things happen. And
Yeah.
I don't know why I felt like if it's God's work, I have to make it happen. You know what I mean? It's like God is huge. I mean, he doesn't need me to make things happen. He uses me as an instrument. So,
Ultimately, it's to develop our trust in him that he does have it in hand.
yes.
Failure is a great tool he uses to redirect us, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
We just
Yeah.
smash into walls and walk off cliffs until we finally go, "Oh, here's where he wanted me." But in that journey, you're developing more trust in him, are you not?
Yes, I am.
Because you know there is that the journey actually is more important than the destination, because that journey is how we grow in that trust. And then every now and then he throws us, as we talked about in another episode, he throws us manna to say, "See, there you go, a little
Yeah.
bit of consolation. There you go." And so when we walk with him, just incredible things can happen.
I hope someday to meet you, Trapper.
No, I don't want to do that. Because you're going to be complaining that as long as it took you to get to me and you're on the back of a motorcycle and your butt hurts and about time. You know,
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool, Tammy.
Yeah, that would be.
What state are you in
Well,
again?
I'm in Iowa. Yeah.
Iowa. I just watched Field of Dreams again.
They're going to be doing another movie here,
Is Costner
I
going to do
guess.
it?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Is this heaven? No, this is Iowa. I love that movie. I love Field of Dreams. I love it.
You have a great day.
You too. God bless you. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Tammy. The takeaways today, we kind of covered them along the way. Loaves and fishes, still happening. Everything we read about in the Bible is still happening today. Jesus still sending his angels, his divine interventions, his miraculous healings. And yes, miracle of loaves and fishes, rice and eggs is still going on out there. Awesome. God's timing after a long, long motorcycle ride, his perfect timing, that prayer for the gentleman who was going through such pain at the time. That was beautiful. And also the fact that in case you're having difficulty discerning what God is doing in your life, he's just building our trust. That really, I shouldn't say just, because trust is love. We show our love for God. We show it. There's no better way than just to trust him and accept what's going on and say, I know you're up to something here. I just don't quite know what it is yet, because the journey is more important than the destination. That's where we build that trust. That's where we build that love. He delights when we trust him. Thanks again, Tammy, for your stories. All right, what is your story? Get a hold of me here at touchedbyheaven.net. Patreon is here at episode 208 as well. Click your way through. Thank you so much for supporting what we do here. And, by the way, boy, we're still getting great demand on the CDs or downloads of Did You Hear What God Just Said? This has to do with reading how God is speaking to us, and always has. He speaks in burning bush. He speaks in motorcycle seat. Yes, he does. So Did You Hear What God Just Said? And Mary His Messenger. Both are just great ways of understanding God's conversation with us. See you next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. This is Trapper Jack, asking the question that still needs to be answered.
Is this heaven? It's Iowa. Iowa?